noticed the pattern by now. The people you find yourself drawn to, genuinely, powerfully drawn to, not just casually interested in, have a particular quality in common. They're not quite available, emotionally guarded, inconsistent, distracted by something else, already half out the door in some way, even while they're standing in front of you. And the people who are actually available, steady, clear, consistently interested, easy to be with, don't produce the same pull. They feel pleasant, sometimes even a little boring. Something in you isn't activated by them the way it's activated by the other kind. You've probably tried to talk yourself out of this. You've dated the available person, the one who showed up reliably and wanted you clearly, and felt underneath the genuine appreciation, a kind of muted quality to the whole thing, like watching a movie with the sound turned down. And then you've met someone who runs hot and cold, who keeps you slightly unsure of where you stand, and something in your chest lit up in a way it hadn't in months. This isn't bad luck. It isn't a coincidence that keeps repeating itself by accident. It's a pattern. And patterns like this one almost always have an origin that makes complete sense once you understand it. Let me start with the thing that's hardest to hear, because I think it needs to be said directly before anything else makes sense. You are not choosing unavailable people because you enjoy pain. This is the assumption a lot of people make about themselves, usually with some shame attached to it, like there's something masochistic going on, some hidden desire to suffer that's driving the choice. That's not what's happening. What's happening is more specific and, honestly, more understandable. You learned very early that a particular kind of love, inconsistent, effortful, not fully secure, was what love actually felt like. Not because you wanted it to feel that way, because that's the only version of love you had direct experience with, in the relationships that taught you what love was before you had any say in the matter. And the nervous system doesn't evaluate love based on whether it's healthy. It evaluates based on whether it's familiar. Familiar reads as safe, even when the familiar thing is actually difficult. Unfamiliar reads as unsafe, even when the unfamiliar thing is actually what you need. This is why the available person can feel oddly unsettling, even though intellectually you know they're offering exactly what you say you want. Their consistency doesn't match the internal template of what love is supposed to feel like. And the unavailable person feels like coming home, even though what's waiting at that home is uncertainty and pain, because that uncertainty matches the template precisely. I want to walk through how this template typically gets built, because understanding the mechanism changes how you relate to the pattern. Think about the earliest relationship that taught you what love feels like, usually a parent, though it can be any primary caregiver. If that relationship was consistent, if love showed up reliably, if your needs were generally met without excessive struggle, if the connection felt secure most of the time, your nervous system learned that love is safe, available. Something you can trust will be there. But if that relationship was inconsistent, if the caregiver was sometimes warm and present, sometimes distracted or harsh, or simply absent in ways you couldn't predict or control, something different got installed. You learned that love comes and goes, that you have to work for it, watch for it, manage your behavior carefully to try to secure it, because it's not guaranteed just by existing and needing it. And this is the part that explains the attraction pattern specifically. You learn to associate the anxious, uncertain feeling of trying to secure inconsistent love with the feeling of love itself. Because for you, that anxious uncertainty wasn't separate from love. It was what love felt like, because it's what you experienced every single time love was present in your life. So as an adult, when you encounter someone who produces that same anxious uncertainty, someone inconsistent, someone you have to work to secure, someone who keeps you slightly unsure, your nervous system registers something that feels like recognition. This is what love feels like. This is the real thing. And the calm, consistent person who doesn't produce that uncertainty, doesn't register the same way. Not because they're offering less, because what they're offering doesn't match the template your body learned to associate with love. This is the part of dating and relationships that almost nobody explains clearly. If it's reaching you, subscribe. We go here every week. I want to be specific about what unavailability actually offers, psychologically, because it's not nothing. There's a reason it's compelling, and understanding the reason matters. Unavailable people offer intermittent reinforcement. This is a term from behavioral psychology, and it describes something very specific. A reward that comes unpredictably rather than consistently tends to be more powerfully addictive than a reward that comes reliably. This is the exact mechanism behind gambling. If a slot machine paid out every single time, it would be boring. People would use it like an ATM and walk away. What makes it compelling is the unpredictability. You don't know when the reward is coming, so you keep pulling the lever, hoping this time is the time. Unavailable people function the same way emotionally. They're not warm all the time, but sometimes, unpredictably, just often enough to keep you engaged, they are. They show up fully, intensely, in a way that feels like everything you've been hoping for. And then they pull back again. That unpredictable pattern of reward keeps the nervous system far more engaged than consistent warmth would. You're not just enjoying the good moments, you're chasing them, the way you'd chase another pull on the slot machine, because the unpredictability itself creates a kind of compulsive engagement that steady warmth doesn't produce. This is why the relationship with the unavailable person can feel so intensely alive, even while it's making you miserable. The intensity isn't really about how much you're loved. It's about the unpredictable reward structure activating something in your brain that responds powerfully to uncertainty. And consistent love, by comparison, simply doesn't produce that same neurochemical intensity, not because it's lesser, because it doesn't have the unpredictability that triggers the compulsive engagement. I want to talk about what happens in the body specifically when you're with an unavailable person, because the physical sensation gets mistaken for emotional significance all the time. The anxiety of not knowing where you stand, will they call, do they actually care, was that distance about me or about something else, produces real physiological arousal, increased heart rate, a kind of charged, alert feeling, the sensation of being intensely focused on this one person. This feels like passion. It feels like how big love is supposed to feel, dramatic and consuming, but physiologically it's extremely similar to anxiety. The body doesn't have a completely separate set of sensations for this is exciting love versus this is genuine fear of loss. A lot of the markers overlap, which means people often mistake the bodily intensity of anxious attachment for the bodily intensity of deep love, because from the inside, in the moment, they can feel remarkably similar. Meanwhile, the calm of being with someone secure doesn't produce that same physiological charge. The heart rate doesn't spike. The alertness isn't activated. It feels peaceful, which can be misread as feeling unremarkable, even boring, even though peaceful security is actually what makes a relationship sustainable and nourishing over the long run. This is one of the more important things to understand about this pattern. The thing your body is reading as "this feels like real passion" is, in a meaningful number of cases, actually just anxiety. And the thing your body is reading as "this feels kind of flat" is, in a meaningful number of cases, actually just safety, which doesn't activate the nervous system the same way because it doesn't need to. Let me talk about something specific that happens with unavailable people that deserves its own attention: the project of trying to earn their love. When someone is consistently warm and available, there's nothing to earn. The love is simply offered, and your job is to receive it. When someone is unavailable, something different happens. You start working for it, trying to figure out what would make them more present, more consistent, more invested, adjusting your behavior, your appearance, your level of need, trying to find the exact combination that will finally produce the security you're craving. This project, the project of trying to earn consistent love from someone inconsistent, is enormously compelling for a specific reason. It gives you something to do. It gives you a sense of agency in a situation that's actually mostly outside your control. And for people who learned early that love had to be earned, who grew up with a caregiver whose affection was conditional on behaving a certain way, achieving a certain thing, managing your needs to be less inconvenient, this project feels deeply, uncomfortably familiar. It's the same task you've been doing your entire life, trying to be the version of yourself that finally secures the love that was never simply given. The unavailable partner becomes, without either of you fully realizing it, a stand-in for that original task. And some part of you believes, even though you'd never say it out loud, that if you can finally succeed this time, if you can finally get this person to fully commit, fully show up, fully choose you, you'll have proven something that the original relationship never let you prove. That's an enormous amount of psychological weight to place on a person who is, in the present moment, simply someone you're dating. But it's exactly why these relationships can feel so disproportionately important, so impossible to walk away from, even when every rational part of you knows you should. I want to talk about what happens specifically when you encounter someone who is actually available, because the discomfort there is worth examining directly. A lot of people, when they meet someone genuinely consistent and emotionally present, report a strange experience. They find themselves looking for problems, inventing distance where none exists, becoming suspicious of the very steadiness that should feel reassuring. This isn't because the available person is secretly wrong for them. It's because steady love, without the anxious uncertainty their nervous system associates with real love, can feel oddly unconvincing. Something in them is waiting for the catch, because their internal template doesn't include a version of love that simply works without struggle. Some people respond to this discomfort by unconsciously creating the struggle themselves, picking fights that don't need to happen, testing the available partner to see if they'll actually leave, because some part of them doesn't trust the relationship until it's been threatened and has survived the threat. Others respond by simply losing interest, mistaking the absence of anxiety for the absence of attraction, and drifting towards someone less secure who reactivates the familiar pattern. If you've experienced this, meeting someone genuinely good for you and feeling strangely unmoved, or feeling compelled to create problems that didn't need to exist, that's not evidence that the relationship was actually wrong. It's evidence of exactly the pattern this video is describing. Your template for love doesn't yet include the version that's actually healthy, so the healthy version doesn't register the way it logically should. I want to address something directly. This isn't about blame, either toward yourself or toward whoever shaped this pattern in you. The people who taught you this template, usually parents, usually without any intention of doing harm, were often doing the best they could with their own unresolved patterns, their own stress, their own limitations. Understanding where this comes from isn't about assigning fault. It's about understanding the mechanism clearly enough that you can start to work with it instead of being controlled by it without realizing what's happening. And blaming yourself for the pattern doesn't help either. You didn't choose to have a nervous system that associates anxiety with love. You didn't choose the relationships that taught you this template before you were even old enough to form complex memories of them. What you can choose now, as an adult with more capacity for awareness than you had as a child, is what you do with the pattern once you can see it clearly. That choice doesn't happen instantly. Recognizing the pattern intellectually and changing your actual attraction in real time are two very different things, and the gap between them can be frustrating. You might understand everything in this video completely and still feel the same pull toward the next unavailable person who crosses your path. That's normal. The template was built over years, through repeated experience, below the level of conscious thought. It doesn't dissolve the moment you understand it intellectually. But understanding it is still the necessary first step, because you can't change a pattern you don't recognize, and a huge number of people live their entire romantic lives repeating this exact dynamic without ever realizing there's a pattern at all. Let me talk about what it actually takes to shift this, because understanding alone isn't enough, even though it's necessary. The shift happens through accumulated experience, not through insight alone. Specifically through the experience of staying with the discomfort of being loved consistently, long enough for your nervous system to slowly update what it associates with safety. This means, practically, choosing the available person even when they feel less exciting, even when the absence of anxious uncertainty registers, at first, as the absence of real feeling. Staying anyway, giving the relationship enough time for your body to learn a new association, that calm can also mean real, that peaceful can also mean deep, that the absence of a chase doesn't mean the absence of love. This is genuinely uncomfortable, and it doesn't resolve quickly. Some people describe an almost grief-like process in early relationships with secure partners, mourning the loss of the intensity they're used to, even while recognizing intellectually that the intensity was never actually good for them. It also means noticing, specifically, when you're creating unnecessary distance or conflict in a relationship that doesn't need it, and asking honestly whether the distance is about a real problem or about an old template trying to recreate familiar uncertainty. And it means being willing to sit with the discomfort of unfamiliarity without immediately concluding that the discomfort means something is wrong. Unfamiliar isn't the same as wrong. It's just unfamiliar. And the only way it becomes familiar, the only way your nervous system eventually updates its template, is through repeated experience of staying inside it long enough to learn that it's actually safe. I want to talk about a specific role that often gets overlooked in this dynamic. The role you play, not just the role they play. It's easy to focus entirely on the unavailable person's behavior, their inconsistency, their distance, their pattern of pulling away. But there's a complementary pattern on your side that deserves equal attention. If you keep choosing unavailable people, you've probably also become very good at a particular role. The one who pursues, the one who reaches across the distance, who works to close the gap, who stays engaged even when the other person isn't matching your effort. This role can feel paradoxically like a source of identity and even competence. You're good at this. You know how to read subtle signs of interest, how to manage your own anxiety while waiting for a response, how to keep yourself engaged in uncertainty without falling apart entirely. These are real skills developed through real practice. And here's the uncomfortable part. Those skills don't have much use in a relationship with someone who's actually available. If someone shows up consistently, clearly, without games or distance, there's no gap for you to skillfully close, no uncertainty for you to expertly manage. The very capacities you've built, capacities that feel like a core part of how you operate in relationships, simply aren't needed. This can produce a strange and rarely discussed kind of loss when you're with someone secure. The loss of a role you didn't realize you'd built your identity around. Without the project of pursuing, some people don't quite know who they are in a relationship. The skill of closing distance was so central to how they understood themselves as a partner that its absence feels like absence of purpose rather than what it actually is, the absence of a problem that didn't need to exist in the first place. Recognizing this is important because it means the work isn't only about changing who you're attracted to. It's also about discovering who you are in a relationship when you're not the one chasing. That's a real adjustment, and it takes time to find footing in a role that isn't built around pursuit. Let me talk about something specific that happens in the early stages of dating someone unavailable, because the early signals are usually there, just easy to misread. There's almost always a moment, fairly early on, where the unavailable person reveals something about their pattern, a comment about not being good at relationships, a story about consistently leaving when things get serious, a clear statement that they're not looking for anything committed right now. And there's almost always a specific response to this information that's worth examining. The belief that you'll be the exception. This belief is powerful, and it's rarely examined directly. Somewhere in the early excitement of the connection, a quiet conviction forms. They've said this about themselves, and they've probably meant it with other people, but with me, things will be different. My presence, my love, my particular way of being with them will be enough to override the pattern they've described. This belief feels personal and specific in the moment, but it's actually one of the most common experiences people have when entering relationships with unavailable partners. Almost everyone who's been in this position has had some version of this exact thought. The honest, if uncomfortable truth is that you are very rarely the exception. The pattern someone has described about themselves, especially if it's a pattern they've lived out repeatedly across multiple relationships, usually isn't waiting for the right person to dissolve it. It's a structural feature of how they currently relate to intimacy, and it tends to require their own internal work to shift, not simply the arrival of a sufficiently wonderful partner. This isn't meant as a hopeless or cynical statement. People do change, including in relationships, but the belief that you specifically will be the one who changes someone else's established pattern is worth examining honestly rather than accepting automatically, because it's often less about evidence and more about the hope that this time the project of earning consistent love will finally succeed. I want to talk about something that happens after these relationships end, because the aftermath has its own specific pattern that's worth understanding. When a relationship with an unavailable person ends, whether they leave or you finally do, there's often a period of grief that feels disproportionate to the relationship itself. Sometimes the relationship wasn't even that long or that deep in terms of actual shared history. But the grief can feel enormous, consuming, far beyond what the relationship's actual substance would seem to warrant. This makes more sense once you understand what's actually being grieved. It's rarely just the loss of this specific person. It's the loss of the project, the loss of the hope that this time you'd finally succeed at earning the consistent love that's eluded you. The ending doesn't just take away a partner. It takes away the most recent attempt at resolving something much older than this particular relationship. This is why people sometimes find themselves grieving an unavailable ex far more intensely and for far longer than they grieved a previous relationship with someone genuinely good for them who simply wasn't the right fit. The intensity of the grief tracks with the intensity of the unconscious project, not necessarily with the actual depth or health of the relationship itself. Understanding this can help with one of the more confusing parts of this pattern, the sense that you can't seem to get over someone who, by any objective measure, treated you poorly or inconsistently. That confusion often comes from comparing the grief to the relationship's surface qualities rather than to what was actually happening underneath. The old attempt at earning love that finally, painfully, didn't work out. It's also worth naming that this grief, however intense, is not actually evidence that the relationship was right or that you've lost something irreplaceable. It's evidence that something old and significant was activated by the relationship, and that its ending forces you to feel the loss of the project itself, not just the loss of this particular person. I want to talk about what genuinely secure love actually requires of you, because it's not simply a matter of finding the right person and then automatically feeling settled. Secure love requires a specific capacity that the anxious pattern doesn't develop. The capacity to tolerate good things without waiting for them to be taken away. This sounds simple, but for people whose template was built around inconsistency, it's genuinely difficult. There's often an undercurrent of waiting for the other shoe to drop, even in a relationship that's going well, a persistent low-level vigilance scanning for the signs that this too is going to become unreliable, because reliability has never been something you could fully trust. This vigilance doesn't disappear just because you're now with someone consistent. It takes active, repeated practice to relax it. to notice the vigilance when it arises, and to choose deliberately to trust the evidence of consistency that's actually in front of you rather than the old expectation that good things don't last. This is sometimes described as learning to receive love, and it's a genuinely different skill than the skill of pursuing love that the unavailable pattern develops so thoroughly. Receiving requires letting something in without immediately needing to manage it, earn it, or test it. It requires a kind of stillness that can feel almost unbearable at first if you're used to the constant activity of pursuit. The good news, if there is good news in this specific part of the conversation, is that this capacity can be built. It's not a fixed trait you either have or don't have. It develops the same way the anxious pattern originally developed, through repeated experience, except this time, the experience is one of safety repeatedly confirmed rather than safety repeatedly withdrawn. Each time you receive consistent love without sabotaging it, without testing it unnecessarily, without manufacturing distance to make it feel more familiar, each time you simply let it be there and let yourself benefit from it, you're building a small amount of new evidence. Over time, with enough of these moments accumulated, the capacity to receive love without anxiety becomes more available, not effortless, but available in a way it wasn't before. I want to talk about something specific that happens with friends and family when you start trying to break this pattern, because the people around you often play a role here too, even unintentionally. If you've spent years drawn to unavailable partners, the people who love you have probably watched this happen multiple times. They've likely formed strong opinions about it, frustration, concern, sometimes a kind of exhausted resignation about your pattern. When you start dating someone genuinely available, you might expect celebration from these people. And sometimes you get it. But sometimes, confusingly, you get something else. A kind of skepticism, even from people who love you because they've watched you describe previous unavailable partners with the same excited language you're now using to describe someone different. They may not yet trust that this time is actually different, because from the outside, intense interest in a new partner has historically been a warning sign rather than reassurance. This can be disorienting. You're finally doing something different, something healthier, and the people closest to you might not immediately recognize it as different because the early excitement of a new available partner can look, from outside, similar to the early excitement of a new unavailable one. Give this time too. Their trust will likely catch up once they see the relationship's actual pattern over months rather than the initial weeks. And in the meantime, their skepticism, however frustrating, isn't necessarily evidence that you're repeating the old pattern again. It might just be evidence that they've seen this story before and need more data before updating their expectations. It's also worth checking, honestly, whether their concern is actually pointing at something real. Sometimes the people who know us well can see patterns we're still inside of and can't yet see ourselves. It's worth holding both possibilities at once, that they might simply need time to trust the change, and that they might also be noticing something worth examining. Dismissing their concern automatically isn't necessarily wiser than accepting it automatically. The honest move is to actually look at what they're responding to, rather than assuming either that they're wrong or that they're right without checking. Let me say one more thing about hope, because I don't want this entire conversation to feel like a diagnosis without a path forward. Understanding this pattern is not a life sentence. People do shift their attraction over time. Plenty of people who spent years drawn exclusively to unavailable partners eventually find themselves genuinely deeply attracted to someone secure. Not settling for them, not choosing them out of resignation, but actually wanting them with real desire and real engagement. This shift tends to happen gradually, through exactly the process described here, recognizing the pattern, tolerating the discomfort of unfamiliarity, building new evidence through repeated experience of safety. It rarely happens through insight alone, and it rarely happens overnight. But it happens, The template that got built through years of inconsistent experience can be revised through enough consistent experience in the other direction. The nervous system that learned anxiety as love's signature can learn something different, given enough time and enough genuine practice. You're not stuck with this pattern permanently. You're just at the beginning of a slower process than you probably wanted to hear about. And that process starts with exactly what you're doing right now. Actually seeing the pattern clearly enough to start working with it. I want to close with something important about timeline because this kind of change is slower than people want it to be. You will probably not read this, recognize the pattern, and immediately stop being drawn to unavailable people. The attraction will likely still be there for a while, possibly for a long time. That's not failure. That's just how deeply embedded patterns actually work. What changes first isn't the attraction itself. It's your relationship to the attraction. You start to recognize it when it happens. Oh, this is the pattern. This person feels exciting because they're inconsistent, not because they're actually right for me, even while still feeling the pull. That recognition, repeated enough times, eventually starts to create some space between the feeling and the action. You feel the pull toward the unavailable person, and instead of immediately following it the way you always have, you pause, you notice it, you ask whether this is actually what you want, or whether it's the old template activating. Over time, with enough of these pauses, the choices start to shift. Not because the old pull disappears completely, but because you develop the capacity to choose differently even while feeling it. That's the realistic version of change here. Not a sudden transformation where unavailable people stop being attractive and available people suddenly feel thrilling. A slower, more honest process of recognizing the pattern in real time and choosing again and again in the direction of what's actually good for you rather than what simply feels most familiar. For the comments, when you think about the people who've pulled at you the strongest, what did they have in common? Name the pattern. That's where this starts. I'll see you in the next one.